Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It is Friday, the last weekday, last time we're on the air before Super Bowl 57. I'm pretty excited, not going to lie. Not going to lie. I'm excited for it to just be here at this point. I think, we've talked about it already this week. It's just not. It just really doesn't have that feel, that hype that maybe previous Super Bowls have had. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think you really kind of came as close to possibly figuring it out as anyone has. And it's really, there's not a villain. And it's not that like there's not this want and need for, say, the Chiefs to lose. I think if you're going to ask people, I think that's the only thing that some people will be connected with. They want to see the Chiefs lose. But I think the villainousness of the Chiefs doesn't necessarily come from the Chiefs themselves, John. It's the media. I think people hate the media coverage of the Chiefs, particularly or especially Patrick Mahomes, who secured his second MVP trophy yesterday. I think that's where a lot of the hate comes from. So I don't think people like. I like Patrick Mahomes. I know you do. I mean, people again shocked when I say I like Patrick Mahomes. But like I just think that the coverage of him is outrageous, and I think it turns a lot of people off. As much as the Chiefs fans want to think they're at the level of the Patriots right now, they're not. So there was people hated the Patriots for other reasons. Obviously, the winning, there was the legitimacy of these quote unquote cheating controversies. That's a discussion for another day. But obviously, there was that factor that played into it. Right now, I don't think either team is hated. I don't think the players are necessarily hated. I think the only thing that's hated is the coverage by the media.
And also maybe the fan bases too. I mean, Philadelphia is not a warm, cuddly sports town, right? I mean, we think it's negative in Boston. Well, go listen to Philadelphia sports talk radio. They're like Boston on steroids. Still think Boston, New York, and Philly are the three most passionate sports cities in America. Philadelphia seems to be on the very dark side. So that's part of it. Kansas City's fan base is confident and cocky right now because the Chiefs have gone to 5 straight AFC championship games, now 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. They have Patrick Mahomes. So sure, I think the fan bases may be a turnoff for some people. And yeah, I get your point, Ian, as far as like the national media anointing Patrick Mahomes as the greatest quarterback ever. And you hear him now being compared to Michael Jordan. Well, Jordan has 6 titles that changed the sport, changed the marketing of his sport. So before we compare anybody to Michael Jordan, let's calm down a little bit here, right? Because of his impact on and off the court. Mahomes is sensational. But again, this is the legacy game for him because, as you've compared him to many times, at this stage in his career, we're not saying he's not going to improve it down the road. He's kind of Kurt Warner, right? 2 league MVPs, 3rd Super Bowl appearance. If he loses Sunday, like Warner, he's 1-2. Now he's only 27. He's got a lot of time to add to that resume, and he probably will. But let's let him get there before we start putting him up in rarefied air with the Bradys and the Mannings, Elways and Montanas. Let's just pump the brakes just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's the overwhelming feel among those of us who are called Mahomes haters, or you're just hating. It's like, no, I'm not hating. I'm just, trying to keep it in perspective. And look, I mean, again, we've talked about it already. The biggest storyline in this Super Bowl is unfortunately not necessarily being talked about, right? And that is Mahomes' legacy. So instead of talking about him among, again, what I call a logjam, and I use this term, in a positive way. I'm not saying this is like, a bunch of just people just stuck together. No, you're talking about the greatest of the greatest quarterbacks. And there's really like a chunk of Hall of Famers that are all not the same, John. I'm not trying to say that, but their resumes and accolades and everything they've done have kind of fallen in the same bubble. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of overlap there. And that's where you're going to find a majority of Hall of Fame quarterbacks. There's going to be a few that, have done, less and probably are, you put 2 names next to each other. They're like, okay, this player, whatever. Maybe he got in. Eli Manning, for example, when he gets in. maybe he got in just because of those Super Bowls and not so much his resume. Maybe he's not in that thick of the group. And likewise, there's a couple quarterbacks right now that are very much ahead of that curve. Brady obviously being one of them. I believe Joe Montana, Peyton Manning. So Mahomes is in that he's in the what would you call 90th percentile? Okay,
Mhm.
He's in the 90% of great quarterbacks that, if his career ends today, well, if it ends today, unfortunately, he'll only have one Super Bowl. But the point being, like, assuming he plays another couple seasons, it's very likely he's going to be headed for a Hall of Fame type career. Just, I mean, resume alone is going to stack up very nicely to a lot of those players. But we're not talking about him being the greatest, and that conversation is so far from happening. Again, it's silly that it even gets brought up, and the problem is it turns off a lot of fans that otherwise I think would be into the discussion. Even Patriots fans who, again, there's going to be fans that are going to hate to see anyone do anything well outside of Tom Brady or the Patriots or whatever. But the reality of it is, I would say most Patriots fans, even hardcore Brady honks like myself, love seeing greatness because, well, guess what? The sport sucks if there's not greatness. Trust me, we see it every Thursday. Mediocre football. Imagine if it was like that across the board. And you know what? Without Tom Brady, you're facing a reality that hasn't existed in the NFL in 23 years. So yes, you want to see greatness.
In good shape as far as absolutely. I think the sport's in good shape with the young quarterback.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't want to see Trent Hill. We don't want to see Trent Hill for Kerry Collins, right? From the Super Bowl 22 years ago, which may have been the worst matchup of quarterbacks ever. Was dominated by the Ravens defense. Yeah, you want to see these great quarterback matchups. We don't necessarily have one Sunday. We do have the top two finishes in the MVP voting, but one distance the other. We are in all agreement that Mahomes is trending to be an all-time great. Jalen Hurts had a sensational year. Is he going to do this year in and year out? We're going to have to see. But yeah, no, we love to watch greatness. Absolutely. Who doesn't? I mean, in any sport, you want to see that in basketball. You want to see the great accomplishments of Shohei Ohtani in baseball, Connor McDavid in hockey, and so on and so forth. That's what attracts fans. If you just have a bunch of, guys out there, the sport's not the same.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's what I think a lot of people are confusing when it comes to this jealousy or envy or whatever. No, we're not jealous. We're not threatened. I say either Patriots fans or fans of Tom Brady or any other great quarterback, really. I know Tom's always the focus, but obviously his career just finished, so he's been in the league, so it's appropriate. But this includes Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, all these other great quarterbacks that, to this point, they were better than Patrick Mahomes, and that's not an outrageous thing to say. So I think the overall talking points need to change. But again, this is you're finding this across sports everywhere. I mean, it's either the greatest or it's the worst, or we're going to overhype this, underhype that. It's a mess. So I don't think that's necessarily going away. So for someone like me, you got to kind of separate the coverage from the actual game. And when you do that, you're like, okay, you got yourself a great matchup between two of the great young quarterbacks in the league. That's the incredible thing. You know what I mean? Like, forget about Mahomes leapfrogging 18 quarterbacks to be the GOAT. Talk about the first matchup between two African-American quarterbacks and the significance, not only of that, but the fact that these two guys are 27 or under. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jalen Hurts is the youngest quarterback or will be when the game starts. He'll be the youngest quarterback to its start in a Super Bowl. That's awesome. That's incredible. Yep. And I think that's something that truly, these are the real things that need to be covered and discussed, and not these outrageous, over the top debates about legacy that really turn off a lot of people, because it kind of dumbs down the coverage. You know what I mean? It kind of just makes it like, I always think of Elaine, standing in front of the tire spin thing, just sitting there clapping her hands, like just so impressed by it. And that's what it is. It's like, you ask dumb questions, you get dumb debates. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
When Elaine abstained from sex and was not as smart, George abstained from sex and was speaking fluent Portuguese at that point, right? So, yeah.
It's like, you took Portuguese? No. Wow. Yeah, I love that episode, by the way.
Great episode, Seinfeld. I mean,
well,
175 of them.
honestly, it might have one of my favorite lines, or just one-liners in the entire series, and that was when George was at the plate trying to teach Jeter how to hit.
Oh, yeah.
And, their response was, well, we just won the World Series. And he says, yeah, in 6 games. And he, gives that, like, yeah, very impressive.
Right.
Yeah. I know
2 games to the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah. Every time I see it, I know it's coming. And it still gets me every time. So great episode. Yeah. Great episode. But,
agree.
We won't be having 6 games in the Super Bowl. It's 1 game. So let's just kind of dive. Actually, you know what? Real quick. Obviously the NFL awards were last night. Not too many surprises. I mean, I think a lot of these names we had been talking about for a while. Obviously, Mahomes with the MVP, Brian Daboll for the comeback player of the year, I'm sorry, for coach of the year, Geno Smith, comeback player of the year, which I think is a nice change of pace, because normally that's reserved for someone who comes back from injury or whatever. But in Geno's case, I mean, this guy was a former first overall pick. Obviously didn't work out with the Jets, and really, who does work out with the Jets? And he rode the bench for a long time and came out and was, an MVP candidate for a while, and a guy who finished pretty much top 10 in every quarterbacking statistic. So I think very deserving in that sense. Most importantly, though, John, and it's kind of unfortunate, and I don't want to steal the thunder of some others who share this opinion, but it's kind of unfortunate that they kind of just tucked away the Hall of Fame announcement, kind of just, in between all this, dog and pony show that was going on. Like, I don't even know what Kyle Brandt was doing, but the second he came on stage and had his scepter, I just muted the TV, and I was like, I don't need to see this. I don't know what over the top theatrics are going to happen now, but I'm sure it's going to be stupid and lame. And look, if it wasn't, please tell me. But based on the silence and the fact that no one's, jumping out to say, oh, what a great segment, I'm guessing it was probably stupid and lame. So either way, it's kind of unfortunate that something of great importance to the league itself just kind of gets, I feel like this is just a passing segment, like a transition to something else. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, all right, here are the Hall of Famers. All right, let's move on. And I mentioned I didn't want to steal the thunder, because obviously Clark Judge, Ivor Kaufman, we had Rick Gosselin on just the other day to talk about the newest class. And they've talked about having something more dedicated to the Hall of Fame, i.e. essentially a month. And that means not, hiding the announcement in between this NFL honor show, which is almost as useless as the Pro Bowl, but using a month like June to showcase the Hall of Fame and all its players and its class, a month that is quite frankly useless to the NFL right now outside of mini camps. So why not, instead of, look, the NFL overdoes everything in this league. They overcover every single aspect of the league. They overdo everything. I mean, they want football on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So why can't they do that with the Hall of Fame? I mean, trust me, we know they don't care about retired players, John. But this is about the least that you can do for them.
Well, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to do it last night, because that's about this year's honors. This is completely different. And baseball, okay, they announced the class in January, which I don't think is the brightest thing either. It's like too far away. Basketball does it on the Final Four weekend, which that kind of makes some sense. But maybe you could do it the weekend. Well, they had the Pro Bowl, which somehow still garners, or whatever the hell that thing is last week, still garners some attention. Maybe do it the week between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. The idea of June, yeah, that makes sense, because by then the league kind of goes quiet for a little bit. So this could be something that is, gives the Hall of Fame some traction, because this thing was just kind of wedged in, right? I mean, it was
like the third late at night
down, right? And it was, Patrick Mahomes, the MVP. An MVP, a regular season MVP, has not won a Super Bowl in the same season since Kurt Warner 23 years ago. Yada, yada, yada. Brian Daboll did a great job, and Nick Bosa was the Defensive Player of the Year. Good night for the Jets, though, right? Because Darrelle Revis and Joe Klecko made it. Garrett Wilson was the Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Sauce Gardner Defensive Rookie of the Year. Probably the best day the Jets have had since Super Bowl III, right?
Yeah,
so that's
pretty
a good day
much
for them until a couple weeks down the road when they acquired my man Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, of course, right after his 4-day blackout, or that's what it is, right? He's blacking out. I don't know.
He's blacking out, I think, starting Tuesday for 4 or 5 days, and when he wakes up, maybe the Jets have moved on to someone else. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I'm with you 100%. Let's give these guys a little more love, right? I mean, and some of these guys are, once again, there's 2 guys in the class that are younger than Tom Brady. They're all Revis and Joe Thomas. So it's like this. By the time Brady gets in there, he'll be the oldest guy in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I know, right? That's silly.
So, but these guys are current. We saw Darrelle Revis play, best cornerback since Deion Sanders. Joe Thomas, great offensive lineman who played on a horrible team. So give them a little bit more love and have it on a special day. Used to be the Saturday before the Super Bowl, which again they lose a little there because the Super Bowl's the next day, but at least that's something, right? It's kind of its own day. I don't think it should be on the same night as that season's award show.
Well, look, I think they're doing a lot of great things right now at the Hall. So with everything, the changes made with Jim Porter coming in as president. So this is something that I'm sure will be addressed because they are very open to the concerns or thoughts of everyone. And again, obviously this has more to do with the NFL programming as well. They need to be able to do this, but think of, again, and look, this isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but think about how you can dedicate more time to not only the incoming class, with the induction being in August, you can get their careers in the front of a lot of people. We're seeing players now. Well, you've been seeing players, but I'm starting to see players now that obviously I grew up watching. These are the guys that were constantly there around when I was around, and obviously I saw Deion and Emmitt Smith and all those Cowboys teams, but I was too young. These are the guys that the bulk of my childhood watching. Some of these guys going in right now, so let's make sure that these names and the guys, especially of say the senior class, 3 members went in, 2 as well as on top of the modern era. Let's make sure that they're not forgotten, and not just by name, but who they were as players. Because I figure, look, I'm 36 going on 37, and there is a lot of players out there that I'm just not old enough to have seen, and I don't even represent the youngest fan base group. So like I said, there's a lot of things that I feel that they can do with an entire month. We see NFL Network coverage. I mean, they have regular season games from week 10 on in the middle of June. You know what I mean? They just isn't a month for them. Let them go out. Let them, really, really give them the Hall of Famers their just due.
Yeah, and especially guys that I remember all these guys. I mean, Chuck Howley, probably the oldest of the players from the Veterans Committee senior class, was the MVP of a Super Bowl in which his team lost. He still remains the only MVP of the Super Bowl whose team lost. That was an awful game. It was one of the first ones I remember. Was the Colts 16, Cowboys 13. I think there was something like 14 turnovers. It was just a horrible, horrible game, as many of the early Super Bowls were. But now he's in there. I barely remember him. Ken Riley, I remember with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cincinnati had some really, really good teams in the 70s, but they happened to be in the same division with the Pittsburgh Steelers at a time when only 4 teams made the playoffs in a conference. So a lot of their great players are somewhat forgotten, including the quarterback of that era, Ken Anderson, who I think is deserving of Hall of Fame consideration, right? So Ken Riley's in there with 65 interceptions. That's a high number. And I was happy to see Joe Klecko get in because, look, there's a guy who, if he was playing today, would be a megastar. He played any position along the defensive line. He could play end, he could play tackle, he could play nose. His battles against John Hanna twice a year in the AFC East were epic. I mean, they were just wars. You just zone in and see those 2 guys go at it. And when the game was over, they'd kind of hug each other and say, "Good job, my friend," because they had so much respect for each other. So I was glad to see him get in there as well. So, yeah, I'm fortunate to be old enough to remember this. I wonder if now you're starting to feel a little old that some of the guys that are getting in are around your age, right? Like Revis and Joe Thomas, essentially, right around your age.
Are you saying I've failed in forging my own Pro Football Hall of Fame career at this point? I mean, I have a chance.
There's still a chance.
I could.
There's still a chance.
I could.
Yep, you could.
I got to bulk up a little bit.
Someone. Yeah, I mean, but you could be that slot receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take one hit and never get up again.
Right, exactly. I'm
right not because I'm hurt, just because I decided, you know what, this is a terrible idea, and I don't want to do this anymore. So
I don't do that. I worked with a guy on radio at the age of 40. Let me guess. He was about 42. Decided to play like tackle football within like the rec league or whatever. There was a tackle football league. He was 42. Decided he was going to play cornerback and against guys that were like 22 or 23. He played on a Saturday or Sunday. When he came in on Monday, we had to carry him into the studio. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, like I said, then it makes you wonder how the hell Tom Brady played until he was 45. So,
yes. Well, he's a freak.
Yeah, well, that's very true. So, all right, let's finish up the show and let's talk about this game real quick because, I've been thinking about it. We've been thinking about it for days now. Who's going to win this game? Who's going to win this game? I'm going with the Eagles, John. Going with the Eagles. I think I've gone back and forth. I just submitted my picks this morning, so I didn't do, I didn't pick this a few days ago. I was really just kind of waiting, going back and forth. There's rumors of a sickness going around the Chiefs locker room. There's this, there's that. But most importantly, I just think the Eagles are a better team across the board. I don't think they have the better quarterback, but I think that the difference is close enough to where you're not losing much going from Jalen Hurts, especially when you add in his running ability and what he can produce on the football field. It's not just about throwing touchdowns. It's how you produce and what you do to help your team produce points. And I think Jalen Hurts is equally as capable of doing that like Patrick Mahomes. And I think he's going to have a really good game against this Chiefs defense, who I think they're going to have a good game, the Chiefs defense, because, again, I think Frank Clark and those guys, Chris Jones, are just, they're really good on the up front. But the Eagles have a really good offensive line. And I don't think they're going to have the type of success that they've had, certainly against, say, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who have, the opposite of a great offensive line, or at least had the opposite of a great offensive line in that game with all the injuries. So I like the Eagles in this one. I like it 27-24. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to come down to the final play. I just think, maybe the Eagles have a 10-point lead and Kansas City makes it close and, there's a little bit of a nail biter. But I like Philadelphia in this one. And, I talked about it earlier in the week. Obviously, the MVP is likely going to be a quarterback. I mean, generally that's the case. My pick would be Jalen Hurts. But if the Chiefs win, I told you this the other day, it's a sneaky good pick at plus 1,800 if it's still there for Travis Kelce, because I feel like if the Chiefs have a big game, obviously Mahomes is going to have a big game, but Travis Kelce is going to catch double-digit passes and probably have a couple touchdowns if the Chiefs are going to win this one. So my pick, Jalen Hurts for the MVP, but sneaky plus 1,800 odds on Travis Kelce.
Good value there, right? You can also look at A.J. Brown, who I think is plus 2,200 for MVP. If Philadelphia is able to throw the football against Kansas City, if Kansas City's so committed to stopping the run that A.J. Brown has a monster game, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, and some big plays, maybe he's an MVP candidate. I went with the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the most difficult Super Bowl that I can recall in me trying to make a pick. Normally, when the teams are set, like the next day, I know who I like. Like last year, I liked Cincinnati with the points, and they did cover. And this year, I've just been going back and forth on this. I do think Philadelphia is the better team, especially along the lines of scrimmage. I just think that Philadelphia just kind of breezed through the playoffs. Now, maybe they're that good. If they go out and win this game by 14, 17 points, you may have to look at the Eagles and say, man, that's a damn good team. They only lost one game with Jalen Hurts under center this year, right? Because their 2 other losses were with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, and then you breeze through the playoffs and beat Kansas City handily. That's a monumental season for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs, had a battle a little bit more. I mean, Jacksonville fought them tough in the divisional round. Cincinnati was right there in the conference championship game. I just think I'm going to go with Kansas City 34-24. This will be a fairly high-scoring game. We haven't really had a high-scoring Super Bowl for a while. I think the last 4
since Philadelphia
under.
and New England.
Philadelphia, right, 41-33. I mean, the Chiefs beat the 49ers 31-20 3 years ago, but that did go under the posted total, which was, I think, was 54 and a half.
There was that late catch
Late
and
touchdown.
run.
Yep.
Yeah, which again, I mean, it makes me kind of roll my eyes when people talk. It's like, okay, I mean, it was a good game. That's why we talk about like over 8 quarters of Super Bowl play. Mahomes has had like 7 subpar to bad ones. And that was kind of, that game against the 49ers, they just, it was sloppy. It was sloppy. And so
it
far,
wasn't a great game. Yeah.
No. So,
it wasn't.
There's a little bit of that element too of it. It's like, look, wake me up when the Chiefs show up for a Super Bowl and actually impress you. You know what I mean? Like, I think we came away from that Chiefs 49ers game thinking, man, 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo blew that. Missing on that throw.
Or Kyle Shanahan.
And again, this isn't to take away anything from the Chiefs, but I kind of jokingly asked, like, why is it that, that incomplete pass against the Buccaneers is the only highlight you show from 2 Super Bowls with Patrick Mahomes? And
no, it's true.
The answer is
Tyreek Hill.
Well, but that's my point. I mean, you would think a guy that, again, this goes back to the outrageous coverage of the kid. You would think a guy that is talked about the way he is would have more than one incomplete pass in a blowout Super Bowl that really is highlighted in its Super Bowl repertoire. But the point is, there's a lot of pressure on Patrick Mahomes to perform because I know his fans will sit there and say, oh, it was because of this, it was because of that. But the reality of it is he may be close to Tom Brady and some other things, but subpar performances in the Super Bowl is not what Tom Brady's known for. He's not had, I mean, he's played in 10 Super Bowls, so there's going to be varying degrees of his accomplishments in those particular games. But like I said the other day, he hasn't had a single Super Bowl game that is anywhere close to as bad as that game Patrick Mahomes had in Super Bowl 55. So again, pressure. And I think the fact that, you brought it up, the Eagles just kind of steamrolled every team this season. And we keep trying to find flaws, but the reality of it is when Jalen Hurts is there and he's healthy, this team is nearly unbeatable. So I think that's gonna.
I think my mind for the most part would say Philadelphia because of those lines of scrimmage, which again, still as much as we love to talk about quarterbacks and all those things, when a team dominates both lines of scrimmage, they're tough to beat. Makes good quarterbacks very good receivers very good, and so on and so forth. So I think that's obviously something where Philadelphia has that advantage. But I'll just go with Kansas City 34-24. I would expect if that's the case, Mahomes will be the MVP, and it'll be a big coronation for him. And then those silly debates will get stronger on Monday morning.
Yeah. That's when I start my own blackout. Just like I'm gonna find out where Aaron Rodgers is going. Yeah, we're gonna do ayahuasca together.
Well, it's only 1,100. Well, this is, again, everybody was crazy when he announced this. I'm sure he's paying a lot more money than this because he's probably going to the best one in the country or the world. Lord knows where he's going. Maybe going to Chile or Peru or wherever. But it's like $1,170 for 4 days. So, and they slide you your food. It's not that much more expensive than a hotel. But then again, you don't get TV and all those accommodations.
Yeah, it's like a theme hotel where it's like the theme is we're going to treat you as awful as possible. And that's what you know going into it. So, but you're still going to pay us a lot of money.
The lamb. Yeah, the sounds of the lamb. You have multiple niggas as your neighbor at some point, screaming out.
Oh, man.
Well, you may be joining Rodgers in that case.
Yes. And probably much longer than 4 days. So, so if that's the case, FPC Radio might be going on a hiatus while I find myself. But
no, until further notice.
I do know we're going to be on a hiatus until Monday, though, the day after the Super Bowl. And we will be back then. So everyone enjoy the game, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the festivities. And of course, give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live. Head over to fullpresscoverage.com. And of course, follow this podcast and all of our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So thank you, everyone. And we will talk to you on Monday.